Welcome back. This time we're talking about A Wrinkle in Time, Disney Studios' big budget adaptation of Madeleine L'Engle's classic 1962 children's book. Now, right off, I need to say that while I was a voracious reader as a child, reading books pretty much all my spare time, I never actually read A Wrinkle in Time or its sequels as a child. I only picked up the book and read it as an adult, and to be honest, it just did not connect with me at that time like I think it would have if I had read it as a child. I have a number of friends who have read it as a child and hold it very in high regard, but it's just not one that I had a lot of connection to. So I went into the adaptation with very little emotional connection to the source material and very little actual recollection of the specific events of the book. And ultimately, I left the movie with a number of the same complaints I had about the book as far as the pacing in the early acts, as well as the additional issues in that there's a lot of moments in this film where it feels like the special effects take over the story. Now, with that being said, it does build up to a pretty entertaining final act, and one that I think book fans will more or less like. There are some noticeable changes from the book to the movie, and as I said, I'm not one that has a huge connection to the source material, so I really can't answer the question on whether or not, as a big fan of the book, that if it's one that you're gonna be able to get behind these changes. The adaptation is directed by Ava DuVernay, who gave us Selma, and as I said, looks beautiful. I just have some problems with the story, which are mostly from the source material. Like the book, the film focuses on a young girl named Meg, played by Storm Reid, who is still suffering from the disappearance of her father 4 years earlier. She has a genius younger brother named Charles Wallace, played by Deric McCabe, and eventually the two of them are joined by a school friend of hers named Calvin, played by Levi Miller. They are visited in succession by a trio of, for lack of a better description, extra-dimensional beings. Mrs. Whatsit, played by Reese Witherspoon, Mrs. Who, played by Mindy Kaling, and Mrs. Witch, played by Oprah Winfrey. And they tell the children that Meg's father is missing somewhere in the universe. He found a way to actually travel great distances instantaneously, and has since become lost in the universe. And the missus need his help to battle against a growing darkness that is slowly taking over the various worlds of the universe and is even making inroads into Earth itself. And thus we have our story. Now, as I said, one of my issues with the early parts of both the book and the movie is that our main character is essentially Meg, and she really doesn't have a lot of action in her own journey. Initially, she is being led by her younger brother, and then when they meet the missus, they become the new guides. They take them everywhere, explain everything. They really don't have to make a lot of decisions. Now, ultimately, Meg will finally have to make a decision, and that leads us into the final act and where the film really begins to build, ultimately to a final confrontation with this growing darkness. And I have to say that was a lot more intense than I was expecting, both from the visuals as well as the emotional impact of those moments. But it just takes us a really long time to get there. Now, my other issue, compounding the slow pace of these early acts, is it really feels at times like the visual effects are there just to have our characters stare and wonder at things and have the younger audiences stare and wonder at the screen. It doesn't really feel at times like these moments are really building to anything, because they really aren't. They're just these stopovers until finally Meg propels her own story forward. So much of what we see early on could have been cut. and it would not have affected the story at all other than to increase the early pace. Now, the acting is really a hodgepodge for me. Storm Reid is really good. She is a great lead in this. I thought the various adult actors hammed it up a little bit too much. Reese Witherspoon and Mindy they're just kind of corny. It just didn't work for me. Now, obviously, as I said earlier, this is not a film for me. This is a film for the younger audiences that connected to the books as children. So these complaints may be falling on deaf ears if you liked these aspects in the book. My other real issue with the film, and I typically don't try to call out particular actors, but I really don't think this was particularly his performance and more how he was directed by someone on set, and that is Levi Miller as Calvin. And my issue is his character is always smiling. When he first comes across Meg and her brother, he's smiling. Every time the various characters are looking in awe at some visual effect, the other two are kind of, slack-jawed. Wow, he's smiling. It honestly got extremely creepy by the end. It's like that person that just won't stop smiling, and it's, why? What's wrong with you? And it was really bugging me, and it continues all the way through the end of the film, and it's just I don't understand. Like I said, I don't think it was him. I mean, if they didn't want him smiling like that, someone would have told him not to. Someone told him to do that. And it just became really distracting to me. So overall, I just did not connect with this film. Like I said, I did not connect with the book, reading it as an adult. But I'm really not the target audience for either. So I'm going to say that I did not find this film overly enjoyable. I'm not going to give it a big recommendation. But that being said, I have the huge caveat that for younger audiences, they may connect with this film in a way that I just did not. And if you're a fan of the book who read it as a kid and want to see this, I'm not going to tell you not to go see it. I honestly don't know how you will like the changes that were made, because I just don't have that connection to the source material. So this may not be the most helpful review, but this is the best that I can offer coming from the perspective that I have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you've seen A Wrinkle in Time, what did you think about it? And were you a fan of the book as a child, and how did that affect your reaction to the movie? As always, you can subscribe to my channel, check out some of my other reviews, and until next time, I'll see you at the movies.